Okay, so it appears to me that intro is over, so we can start our program. My name is Sasha Starr, and we have Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Sure, and we have Ivan Kucherenko from Kiev, Ukraine.
Hello,
Welcome
Sasha.
to the show.
Hello, Jonathan. Glad to be here as well.
Oh,
Oh? Did you just receive a message from the Almighty? What glorious news do you have?
Putin died.
Oh, shut
well, we have an innovation here.
Oh, don't tease me. What else do you have here?
That's a great innovation. So when you say something, then you listen to what you said, and then you correct yourself. If you,
Yeah.
right?
You're completely beside yourself. Oh, we're on a roll today. So, Ivan, do you have a glorious video for us by chance?
Yeah, a really nice video. Let's start with it.
Now, that is an amazing act of humanity on the part of the Ukrainians. That is to their credit.
Yeah. Um,
It's
uh,
nice.
a really act of humanity, though Ukrainians actually has no reasons to be to show such acts,
Well,
especially when we
which
see
makes it all the more noble.
when we see constant news that Ukrainian prisoners of war are being tortured or being killed after they tried to drop their arms and before they've been captured, and the Russians are constantly given orders not to take prisoners among the Ukrainians, but just to kill them. So it's really a great story, but showing that even in when you fight against the barbarians, you should not act like a barbarian.
That is true. Well, oh, there are ghosts in the machine today. Okay. But in any case, I might comment from my recommendation from the last program that Yvonne, I don't think you were here last Friday for what we were commenting about. One of the things I was suggesting was, given the Russian propensity for engaging in these so-called meat assaults, where they're just sending waves and waves. One of the easiest counters to this would be, and if you have contacts who are willing to pass this up to the Ukrainian leadership, military and political leadership, as a question, then they might want to ask the United States or the Defense Department if they would be willing to supply them with 20 millimeter Vulcan weapons. The Vulcans are anti-aircraft weapons from the Cold War, which the United States really never used that much because there was no need. It was but it's a very efficient anti-aircraft weapon, which can fire up anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 rounds per minute. Very effective, high rate of fire anti-aircraft weapon, but it has an even better feature in that I had the privilege years ago when I was a cadet at ROTC Advanced Camp to have the opportunity to fire a 20 millimeter Vulcan anti-aircraft weapon, except that I got to use it in ground attack mode. In other words, you take that 20 millimeter Vulcan weapon and you just fire it at a set of ground targets. Oh my! Just use your imagination, Yvonne. If you were to fire just a pair of 20 millimeter Vulcans in ground attack mode, much like the World War I machine guns were used on the Western Front to create interlocking fields of fire, back with normal bullets, it harvested men like wheat back then, according to the descriptions. But in the modern period, against a Russian meat assault, if you had just several 20 millimeter Vulcans used in ground attack mode in selected places on the Ukrainian front, basically, I told Sasha that would turn the Ukrainian meat grinder into a Ukrainian Cuisinart.
Really nice idea, Jonathan, but the problem is that before launching meat grinder attacks, or as Russian call them, bonsai attacks, they are preparing the area with great artillery fire.
Mm-hmm.
So they're supporting these attacks by artillery fire, and all Ukrainian soldiers have to be in shelters in order just to survive, because they're firing with artillery, they're firing bombs from attack airplanes and all that stuff. And while being in shells, Ukrainians still can use drones against those Russians attacking. So in this situation, drones are more effective. Or if those Vulcan guns, for instance, they will be put on some autonomous land platforms like drone platforms, and they can be used remotely by Ukrainian soldiers while being in a safe place, because it's not possible like in Second World War or in First World War just to take this Vulcan machine gun
and just
and
have a man position just sweeping the battlefield.
Yeah, and fire from trenches on fire from your some defense point, because it will be destroyed immediately by Russian artillery. So
as a matter of fact, your point is well taken, and they would have to. I would rely on the inventiveness of the Ukrainian military to properly incorporate such Vulcan weapons. As a matter of fact, in the Second World War. Now, again, when I was a cadet at West Point, we had a German exchange officer who had been in the Second World War. Okay, and he was on the Russian front, and his job, and this is a miracle that he survived it. He was an artillery forward observer for the Germans on the Eastern Front. The artillery forward observers typically have a very short lifespan, because those are the first people you kill, or if you can take them out. So artillery forward observer, but yes, your point is very well taken. And so if those weapons can be properly incorporated into the Ukrainian defense, either autonomously or subsequently after the Russian counter-battery fire has been suppressed, and then you bring out those are Vulcan. Yeah, and there are any number of ways which could allow them to be properly incorporated. But the goal of supplementing the Ukrainian defense with those 20 millimeter Vulcan weapons would be to raise the price, raise the cost of those meat attacks for the Russians beyond a level which even they would be unwilling to accept.
So it would remind a little bit of a poker game, when there is an ante $5 and then somebody raised to 10, and he wanted to play for 5, but he's scared to play for $10. But the next one say, no, it's now $25. $25? Oh my God.
And people are wondering, what does he have?
Yeah, absolutely.
What does he have? And I will tell you one quick analogous story. I was in a poker game over in Germany, and it was a game of 7-card stud. 2 cards down, the next 4 face up, and the last one down. And I started off with a pair of 5s down, concealed. And I had a third 5 up. So I was in a very strong position. The other fellow, eventually, there was this other fellow who had 3 2s face up. Now, I had him beaten on that, but we kept raising and raising, and I was waiting for that last card to see if I could. And when the final round came, the last card, which was concealed, was also a 5. So I had concealed 4 of a kind, and he had no idea. And he kept raising and raising. I kept raising and raising, and finally, I put my hands on my whole face down cards, and I asked him, "What do you have?" And he had a full house, 3 2s and another pair. Say fine. He had a full house. I flipped my 3 cards over simultaneously, 4 of a kind, wired, and he's like, it was like I'd physically punched him. But again, that's the power of surprise. And the Ukrainians and my point is, the Ukrainians have demonstrated that they are very adept at concealing strength until the proper moment. And that is what I would be counting on in making suggestions like, hey, send them some 20 millimeter Vulcan weapons and see what they can do with it. And just like when we sent them Patriots, they exceeded our expectations for being able to use Patriots. So I have great faith and confidence in the Ukrainian military and political leadership of being able to pull off yet another operational surprise hopefully before the November elections. But even so, even after that, if they can pull off a winter surprise, much as the Germans pulled off during the Battle of the Bulge in 1944, under seemingly unfavorable conditions for an offensive, there is always an opportunity, given sufficient incentive and opportunity and motivation, to pull off a strategic surprise that your opponent clearly does not expect.
Yesterday I've heard a very interesting program. It was an interview of Dmitry Gordon from Kiev and Colonel Tamar from Israel. They would discuss the similarities and differences between the Ukrainian-Russia war and Israel against Iran, Hamas, and others. And what Tamar from Israel, he's been with the Israeli army for several years, and he's now the military historian, journalist. And he's still actively involved. He just recently was on a trip to Ukraine and Czech Republic, and he speaks Russian and knows a little bit Ukrainian. What's interestingly he says about using the long-range missiles against Russians in their territory, because Israel is using any weapons without asking anybody for permission. And he says that you have to just do it. What are you waiting for? Well, we need permission, all that. He
It's
says,
like the old saying: it is easier to beg forgiveness than to ask permission.
What he's saying is that in the history of wars, never ever the winner is being prosecuted or chastised or ridiculed for his actions, as long as you're a winner. So if you see that you don't have permission, let's say you have weapons, you're ready to use them. However, you don't have permission. So then what you do, you just lie down and die or surrender, or what you're going to do? Or you're going to use this and then explain why you were doing that. So do then Ukrainians have to wait for permission which may or may not materialize? Do Ukrainians, with the absence of permission, have to just lie down and surrender? Or do they have to use all weapons, whatever they have in their possession, on Russians in their territory? What do you think, John?
Well, if you're Ukrainian, the answer is obvious.
Yeah.
It's just you're not going to necessarily lie down and die for the sake of saving face for someone who claims to be your ally, who claims to be behind you, but they're not giving you permission. So essentially, it remains for the Ukrainians to force the issue. And it is their choice. They still have their destiny in their own hands. And they, again, depending on the outcome of the election, the U.S. election is too close to call. It's very similar in a way to the situation during the American Civil War in 1864, when the Confederacy could not win a victory, no longer could win a military victory on a battlefield, which would force the issue and compel Great Britain and France to intervene. But they were instead hoping that somehow the Democratic candidate for president, McClellan, who had been a former general in charge of the Union Army, would win, replace Lincoln, and then the Democratic Party would make peace with the Confederacy, because that's what they intended to do. So they were still banking on that. The outcome of an election still had a potentially decisive effect on a war. So now you have the Ukrainians confronting a somewhat similar situation in the 21st century. The outcome of the U.S. election, still very close. The trends appear to be moving more favorably towards former President Trump in the election. He is now becoming increasingly a favorite. And although you get mixed opinions about it, the trends seem to be going in Mr. Trump's direction. And so therefore, now the Ukrainians must calculate. They must thinking, okay, how soon do we roll the dice? How soon do we make another operational gamble, an aggressive move that potentially can throw the Russians off balance even more and create more favorable political conditions for gaining the support, a stronger support from President Trump should he be reelected. It becomes a very finely considered calculation, and it requires a certain measure of courage on the part of the Ukrainian political leadership to be willing, for the sake of their own existence, to take that gamble. And I would not fault the Ukrainians one bit for taking that separate gamble.
Especially if they will take this gamble, it should be before November 5th.
Most probably done during November 5th, but again, depending on the result, they may say, even during that period between November 5th and the time that the next president takes January 20th, you have that gray zone area of opportunity. Again, they would have to make a calculation. Is a winter counteroffensive or a counterstrike worth it? Is it likely to bear highly favorable results? And then, you take it from there. But this entire Russian-Ukrainian war is now on a knife's edge. It's on a knife's edge. The overall trends are in favor of Ukraine. The Russians are showing great signs of war weariness. And also, consider this. The Saudi Arabians have declared that they are going to increase oil production. They want to get a greater market share. What that does is that drives the price of oil down, and which hurts Russia because they depend on oil exports in order to gain revenue to sustain their war effort. Former President Trump has also declared that if he is elected, he is going to adopt what is called the drill, baby, drill course of action, greatly increase U.S. energy resources and output in fossil fuels and oil drilling and fracking and the whole bit. That will further drive down oil prices and further hurt the Russian ability to finance its war effort. So both of those developments are in Ukraine's favor. And then Ukraine, for its part, can take the opportunity. And there are signs now that Ukraine and Israel have, in fact, been communicating, at least covertly. They're not making a big show of it. But if they cooperate, and if they can find means, such as just being fanciful, Ukrainians saying to Israel, "Hey, can you show us how to do that drone? How to do that trick with setting off pagers and radio results? Can we send Putin a pager for Christmas?"
There is one consideration I would like to mention it. Jonathan, you're familiar with Victor Hansen's book, The End of Everything?
I have heard of it. I have not yet had the opportunity to read it. I have watched and read a number of Victor Hansen's essays, and I have a great deal of respect for his opinion and his research.
And I've watched one episode. I think it was produced by Hoover Institute, where he was interviewed. And the thesis of his book is that it's a false narrative that all wars end in peace. And he brings four well-known examples where the war has not ended in peace, but has ended complete destruction of one of the sides, and not just destruction in that particular war, but forever or for several centuries. So obviously, he's talking about Carthage war against Romans.
Carthaginian peace, the absolute annihilation of the opposing state.
At the end of the day, there was not a peace. It was completely annihilated. And then there was a war of Ottomans against Byzantia. And Byzantia essentially ceased to exist as a result of that war. Then he's talking about Aztecs, war against Spaniards, and so on. I'm not going to list all those wars. There are quite a few that he mentioned, but there's 3-4 major ones that everybody knows of. So in this case, I think it's a very, very dangerous to count on some kind of peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, because if that determination of Putin, he doesn't need this for areas, for oblasts, so on. He needs all Ukraine, and that's his goal. Even there would be some kind of a peace treaty for whatever, few months, 3-6 months, whatever. It will just let him to finish mobilization. He'll put 2 million people at arms. He will get all his arms together, and he will get more arms probably from North Korea. By the way, North Korean soldiers are already taking place in war, and then he's got whatever he's still able to take from Iran. Although Iran is another story. That's what's happened with Iran and Israel. Israel is determined, according to Colonel Tamar, he is determined to make this the last war of Israel. What it means? It means Israel will destroy Iran's capacities, destroy Hezbollah and Hamas, and it will be a peace, if it's not already there, with all those Arab countries surrounding Israel. So there will be no need for war anymore.
Right. Israel will, in effect, impose a Carthaginian peace on its opponent, on Hezbollah, Hezbollah and Hamas, and if necessary, Iran, and or at the very least, render Iran incapable of engaging in further offensive action.
I don't know what makes it incapable is the destruction of Hamas and Hezbollah, because all military might of Iran was based on Hezbollah and Hamas, who will continue to attack Israel or so on. So Iran will just supply the weapons and so on and be quite in the background. But with destruction of Hezbollah and Hamas, then Iran is exposed to all the military possibilities of Israel. So this is something what could be also be a theme of the end of everything scenario. Now, I've heard that there were very substantial drone attacks on Russians lately. Ivan, what have you heard about that?
Yeah, according to the official information, because unfortunately no other ways to discover what's happening in Russia, and of course some Russian sources which also show the consequences of those drones attacks until they were banned from showing them. There were recent successful strikes on the Russian airfields. The oil production, oil transfer facility in Crimea in Feodosia, which was burning for several days, and I just continue to say that these attacks are being made by Ukrainian weapons, and they're bringing a great effect on Russia. And just imagine what effect can Ukraine achieve with the using of long-range Western weapons. So that permission actually is very important for Ukraine to get, and there is no reasons why it can be given to Ukraine. I don't understand, and I don't see any clear reasons. And at the time when North Korea is openly supporting Russia, and there are already North Korean soldiers fighting in Russia, according
well,
to
we have a movie about North Korea.
Latest reports. Yeah, I've got a very short movie about the North Korean forces in Russia, so let's watch it.
Okay.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea are already fighting in Ukraine. In addition, several thousand North Korean soldiers are undergoing training in Russia and may be transferred to the front line in the future, reports the Institute for the Study of War. It is noted that the North Korean military is probably operating in the occupied part of the Donetsk region. Analysts also remind that several North Korean officers were killed as a result of a recent missile strike near occupied Donetsk. Looking at the fact that Russia has already lost more than 600,000 troops in this war, they are resorting to desperate measures and asking Pyongyang for their troops.
It's absolutely unreal. The thing, though, I heard in the last couple of days that Great Britain is evaluating the possibility to send hundreds of its instructors and technicians to Ukraine and to be actually based in Ukraine. Now, how active there will be on the front lines, that's a different story, but they will be definitely providing training, maintenance for the weapons and so on. So if British will do it first, then I could say that probably France will follow and Germany will follow.
Right.
And we'll see then what the U.S. will do in this situation too.
Now, to point that out, what that would, if the other NATO allies began contributing their own manpower and supporting the defense of Ukraine, that would not necessarily compel, say, President Trump to necessarily because of his America First stance, he would not be inclined to send American troops. However, he might be inclined to provide more economic support and more rebuilding support. For example, he could, as an example, if he did send American troops at all, given his past behavior and inclination, he could be very likely to send, especially once a ceasefire has been attained and a conclusion to the fighting, he would probably be well advised to send a significant number of engineers, American engineers, to help rebuild Ukraine and to repair all the damage. And they could provide it in the form of advisors. The Americans could either undertake building projects themselves, or they could teach and supervise appropriate Ukrainians forces to help rebuild Ukraine and restore infrastructure. Because the American engineers are very adept at doing that. They proved that they were adept at that during World War II. So there are any number of means that a President Trump in his second term could help Ukraine, and particularly if the NATO allies go ahead and provide additional troops to shore up shortages and to help this in conjunction with the other economic measures that President Trump would be taking in conjunction with what Saudi Arabia is already doing, upping oil production, reduce the revenue, and paralyze the Russian ability to carry on the forces. And I note with some amusement that North Korea is sending all these troops to fight in Russia. Well, okay, that means that Kim Jong-un doesn't have to feed all those North Korean soldiers. And he's thinking, oh, goody, more food for me, as if he needs it.
That's very true, Jonathan. Listen, it's a very dynamic situation, including U.S. elections, of course, everything what's happened on the Ukrainian front. We're all following that, and each new day brings a lot of news and a lot of information. And we'll see on Friday in our next program what news will be there in this 3 days left too. And we'll discuss that. In the meantime, thank you so much for today's program. Thank you so much again, and to our listeners. And we'll see you Friday, same place, same time. Thank you very much. Slava Ukraini.
Thank you. Героям слава. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.